Hey all, Tony Bing here. Hello and welcome to another beginner's guide for Marvel Heroes Omega. For this guide we will be having a look at Angela. Now if you're new to these guides, what we do is we look at various aspects of heroes available in Marvel Heroes Omega, and these guides are applicable to both the PlayStation, Xbox and also the PC version of the game. Now what we actually cover includes a look at the heroes' primary attributes, their offensive and defensive traits. If they have a special resource, we check that out as well. We then have a look at a few of their costumes. We then have a look at their signature and ultimate, and finishing up we do some actual gameplay run-throughs where we'll showcase some of their skills as well. But first up in this video we'll have a look at the attributes, traits and resource. As always for this section we start off looking at the offensive trait, and that's Asgardian Assassin. So with this she gains a 3% flat critical hit chance, and the attributes that she gains bonus damage are durability and speed. Personally I like speed because it ties in with your dodge rating, and on the subject of dodge rating and other defensive stats we have her defensive trait, which is Angelic Warrior. So you gain health on hit. The actual defensive rating multipliers apply to both defense and dodge, so the dodge one works great along with the bonus you can get from speed, so you can get that really high. And on top of that, as a melee hero she has a flat 8% damage reduction as well. Now for her resource, this is where she gets very interesting, and it makes the character almost a barbarian of sorts, where she can fire off lots of skills very quickly and has a lot of burst damage. So this is Heaven's Wrath. Now at the top of the actual tooltip you can see that it says Living Ribbons. Now this is a unique mechanic, and it actually allows her ribbons to automatically attack the enemies as well, so that's pretty nice there just from a flavour point of view. For our actual resource we have Heaven's Wrath, so this will build while you're in combat, doesn't decay. When it's full you trigger Rage of Asgard, and when Rage of Asgard is triggered all your cooldown powers, they actually don't have any cooldown on them at all, so you can spam them one after the other and then they'll consume Heaven's Wrath, which will run down, and then you'll work your way towards running it back up again. So you can get a huge amount of burst damage, and it can look pretty great because she has a crash down skill which we'll show off later, and you can actually leapfrog about the screen spamming that, and it's a whole lot of fun. But what we'll do next is we'll check out a few of her costumes. For the first costume, as always, we look at the default, and this is a classic look, and it really does look pretty nice, this one. The next costume we have here is the Witch Hunter Angela. So this is from the 1602 story arc, and this does look really pretty nice. I love all the armour on it and the headdress as well, it's great looking. But next up anyway, what we'll do is have a look at the signature and ultimate. For the signature we have a skill called Nothing for Nothing. Now it can be a little bit fiddly to use correct, but once you get used to it, it can really be quite powerful. So you get 3 charges on this particular one. The first 2 charges you'll hit with the sword for a huge amount of damage and generate 5% of your max Heaven's Wrath, and then on the final activation you'll hit using your ribbon and your Ichor. The Ichor is our axes essentially, so you have the huge damage packet, bonus damage versus bleeding, and also you regenerate 25% of your maximum health. Now through talents, if you wish, you can actually add an additional portion to this, so you can have up to 4 hits rather than the standard 3. But what we'll do, now that the signature's covered, we'll have a look at her ultimate skill. For the ultimate we have a rather nice looking skill called Hell and Back. So the way this works, it actually works as a dot, the damage portion on it, for 8 seconds. While she's spinning round with the huge sword you will be invulnerable, and her ribbons will periodically pull enemies near to you, so they pull them into the dot area as well. Now once that's complete you then have a steroid on it as well, and that buffs your critical hit damage, brutal strike damage, and you also gain 8% of max health per second, so that's a really strong defensive buff there. But what we'll do next, we have 2 gameplay run-throughs. The first one will show off the sword and axe skills, the second one will show off the ribbons. But for the first one we'll run through the subway, which is where we face off against Shocker. Now just before we start discussing the skills here, I will point out you can see the resource Heaven's Wrath is actually starting to build up there, and when it builds up completely our skills will be highlighted, meaning we can spam them, and at that stage you'll see me firing them all off one after the other. Now onto the skills. The first one, the main spender we're shown here, is Rending Blades, and this actually does bonus damage against bleeding enemies. The next skill we have is Rage of Siphos. So with this one you do 5 quick hits and it actually generates 20 Heaven's Wrath on hit as well, so that would be a total of 100 Heaven's Wrath it would then generate. The next skill we have is a very simple one. It's No Mind Name and Weep, so it's just one initial damage packet where she thrusts the sword forward. It will generate 100 Heaven's Wrath, so in that respect it is useful, but how it looks, it's pretty simple looking. Now the next skill we have, and one I just fired off a moment ago, is Heaven's Fury. It's a skill you've seen various times over these beginner's guides where you dash around the screen, you do various hits. On this occasion it would be 8 different hits you do, and you're invulnerable while you're using this power, so it's always a great one to use if the enemy's about to hit one of their hard one-shot attacks, and fire this off, and there you go, you can see it again there. The next skill we look at then is one that can be quite important, and it can actually define how you want to build her, and this is Icor's Wrath. So with this one, it's an axe attack. You've got your initial damage packet. It has a 100% brutal strike chance, which is great, but on top of that it actually works as an execute as well, so if the enemy's health is low and you're guaranteed that brutal strike, you can do a huge amount of damage. And when we look at the ribbon side of things, there's actually another skill which has a 100% brutal strike chance and an execute. So if you choose, you can go for a brutal damage build, and you can build both of these into a kit for 2 executes and 2 100% brutal strikes, which is pretty great, to be honest. Now the final skill we look at here as we're taking on Shocker is Whirling Wrath, and I always save one that can be good for trash clearing to last. So with this one, you'll spin your axe round and you get 3 charges on this with a low 4-second cooldown, and you do bonus damage against enemies that are bleeding as well there. But what we'll do, we'll fire off all these skills and take out Shocker. You can see the Heaven's Fury just a moment ago there, it does look great. And there we go, that's him down. So that's the sword and axe side of things covered. So what we'll do next is we'll look at the ribbons, and we'll run through the Kingpin's warehouse. Now with these skills here that are based on ribbons, you'll notice with a lot of them there's life on hit on them and health regen, and this actually can really make her really tanky, so it's an important thing to remember when building her. But the first skill we look at is actually Hunter's Blade. So this is one of the leftover sword powers we weren't able to cover in the first section because we didn't have enough space on our bar. So this is an actual basic, and it will regenerate 140 health per hit, and it also generates Heaven's Wrath on hit as well. It's 5 Heaven's Wrath that it generates. We then have our Crash Down skill, which is great to use when you have the rage active because you can bounce about the screen, and I will show that off. But the Crash Down move in question is called Angelic Smite. It generates 100 Heaven's Wrath and it also knocks down the enemy as well. We then have Riven Ribbons. So this particular one, you have the initial damage packet. There we go, we can see the hopping of the smite there anyway, but for the skill we're discussing you can see the initial damage packet. It then has a dot on top of it, it provides vulnerability, and it regenerates health as well, so it's a really pretty great skill. We then have Binding Ribbons, so you'll fire ribbons out in front of you. Now these will weaken the enemy, you have a damage packet, and on top of that it will stun them and regenerate health, so it really does a lot there. You can see I just fired off the skill there, it almost looks like webbing to an extent. Now the next skill we look at here is one we've already touched on to an extent in the last section, so this is our 100% brutal strike chance execute. This one is called Stunning Icors, where you throw out an axe, it will hit the enemy, and when it comes back it's got a chance to hit them again. So if you pair up the 2 executes with the 100% brutal strike, you can really get a huge amount of damage. Certainly an interesting option for her. The next skill we have anyway is a great one for harder content. This is Hypnotic Ribbons. So you'll confuse the enemy, you regenerate health while the ribbons are writhing round you. The animation looks great, but it's actually very useful as well. You've got a 4-second duration on it with a 10-second cooldown. Now the final skill we look at is quite a different one. This is Piercing Ribbons. You can see me using it right now. You fire out lots of ribbons rapidly in front of you and they regenerate health at 700 per second. Now it hits an insane amount of times, but the health will be limited to 700 per per second. It won't be any higher than that, otherwise you'd potentially be invulnerable casting this off. So what we'll do here anyway is we'll fire off all these skills so you can see them, and we'll take down Dr. Octopus. There's the hypnotic ribbons there, the animation does look great as you can see. And there we go, that's him down. So that's another beginner's guide covered. There's only one more to go, which is Ant-Man. Once I've finished with Ant-Man, I'll then go back and I'm going to quickly update Gambit and Doctor Strange, because there are some differences between the console and PC version, and I want these videos to be universal and cover all versions as much as possible. But thanks for tuning in for this series of videos. I appreciate all your support, and I'll see you all again soon.